Okay, so we are joined in conversation today by a very special guest,
Oh, I'm
Don
blushing,
Carmichael,
blushing.
the Don of pre-sales in name and nature.
I've heard that. I don't know what it means, but yet, yeah. Thank you
um,
so much. Yeah.
no problem. So, listen, aside from being, one of the best considered thought leaders in pre-sales,
I'm
I
blushing
want
again. Oh.
again. I wanted to highlight my personal experience with Don, who from the first moment that I came into contact with him has always kind of gone out of his way to help me, and most of the time out of kind of a sense of kindness and altruism. So I'll always be grateful for that. Thanks so much, Don.
Thank you. Thank you. Very kind of you.
No
Yeah.
problem. Okay, so for those that don't know of you already, I know the majority will do. Could you provide us with a quick introduction of yourself, and let us know what you love about pre-sales?
Brilliant. Always difficult saying this, isn't it? So I've been in what you would now call pre-sales around about 35 years, a very long time, hence the grey hair and the wrinkles and all the rest of it. And I basically worked my way up different kind of ERP, enterprise resource planning. So in the software industry, I wrote software, that kind of thing. And I worked my way up into this pre-sales world that I really didn't quite understand how I'd managed to get into it in the first place. We might come back to that, and then eventually got into some of the bigger names. So I was at SAP for 11 years, even though I'd been in the ecosystem beforehand. I was unbelievably privileged to get the chance to write the partner pre-sales curriculum right back in the initial days of their partner programs, and then spent the last 7 years as head of pre-sales development internally in EMEA, and that was when there was about just over 1,000 pre-sales people who were part of that. So that was a scary thing to do, to work out what enablement they actually needed, but also get into all the operations side of things, like how do you measure what people do, what are best practices, and how would you organize yourself to make, to actually distribute those. I have done about just less than a year at Oracle, doing a very, very similar role for EMEA, which was brilliant. But the big thing was in 2015, I was kind of got into a middle management role and realized that I didn't really want to do that with the rest of my career, which it was great. I loved it, learned a huge amount. What I actually wanted to do was work with different tech companies, teams, individuals, and help them kind of build on their skills. So in 2015, I started my company, which is called Winning Skills. And ever since then, we've been running workshops, coaching, and I've been privileged to being asked to do keynotes, that kind of thing. So yeah, so going on, what do I love about pre-sales? One answer would be it's given me a privilege to have given me a career for 35 years of something which has been quite a niche. Even 3 years ago, there's not that many people would understand what it was. And I mean, I'd even argue these days that it's actually quite a bad title. We only tend to use it these days as like an umbrella term.
Yeah.
Most people you meet who are in the profession don't have that as a title, but it's such a distributed, series of different job titles, architects, consultants, and engineers and things, that we at least need something to bring us together. What do I love about it? It's a very demanding role. Once you start examining what's actually inside the role, is that at a minimum, it tends to be a kind of deep knowledge of the technology that you've got, and that's matched with a deep knowledge of the domain and the industry, because it's no good knowing what the technology does unless you can understand how does it fit into this industry or this domain, and how does it create value and outcomes. And and knowing oil and gas is completely different to knowing what the footwear industry is like. There's terminology different. But also it's demanding in the people and communication skills that it demands of us. A huge thing these days is your discovery skills, not just presentation skills, which is a performance art, but discovery, and that's people skills. Communication skills is a standard. People skills, we have to be very highly developed at that. So what I love about pre-sales is that if you want to be challenged and you want to develop, this really interesting, quite complex skill set, then this is a perfect role for you. The other side of it is, because I do a lot of discovery with pre-sales people ahead of the workshops that I run, and I always ask them this really cliched question, which is, what is a day in a life for you? What does it look like? And it's a little bit of a leading question, because I know what the first answer was always going to be, which is there is no standard day in a life. No day looks from one day to the next. And for a lot of people, that's what we love about it as well, is that you're not on some project for 3 months. Is that you're going to be dodging around doing different things. Some of it's going to get a bit boring and kind of things like answering a request for a proposal or something like that. But the other stuff is going to get super exciting, working with salespeople and strategizing. How you're going to go about winning a deal, the challenge of discovery, trying to find out who the real influencers are, what their personal value propositions are, trying to, architect a solution, technical solution that's actually going to deliver on those things. And then just the whole sales journey is exciting. And it's kind of, the sales is all about, it's the hunt. And it's the thrill of the chase, and you get all of that as well. I mean, there's a lot to love about it. The demands on your knowledge and the fact you've got to constantly be learning. But boy, do you get a lot out of it.
Thank you so much. I find it fascinating just listening to you and your passion for pre-sales. Thank you so much. And I believe you've seen a lot of changes for the last 35 years. Pre-sales has changed and evolved over time. So do you think the profile of the ideal candidate has also changed?
Of the pre-sales candidate, yes. When I first got into it, like I said, we had no idea what we were doing or what the role was. We had to kind of make it up. And it seemed to be, and you still see this now, is that especially smaller companies, more technically focused, you'll see that there isn't actually a pre-sales department. There's a group of people who are technically competent, they have technical credibility. They know the product, they know how to talk about it, and they might probably spend most of their time working with clients, might be implementations or consulting. And what happens is there's a sales cycle, and at some point the salespeople need someone technical, and they go, well, you're not doing anything today. Can you come along and present our technology to this potential client? And that might be, for a lot of people, their first experience of pre-sales, and that can be actually quite scary, because if you're not comfortable with that, and especially as buyers have become a lot more challenging, and you don't have much time, like in half an hour you've got to impress. Here's 3 topics you've got to impress, and 3 things that need different value propositions, and you've got this mix of people in the room. It's all quite a challenging thing. So some people, that's their experience of pre-sales. In kind of medium or larger companies, it used to be the way you got into it is you'd start off in a company in like technical support, then you might end up in like consulting, something like that, and then basically maybe the same thing that happened to me, which was as a consultant, I'd got a really low utilization rate, which was causing me a problem. But the reason I had a low utilization rate was I was spending most of my time working with sales. And the reason I ended up in pre-sales is the sales team basically said, we need this person full time, and we can't carry on like this. I kept having to use all these excuses, like, oh, I've got to go to a funeral. My grandmother's died, to go, so that I could get out of working on an existing client to work on a sales deal. But when the same grandmother's died 4 or 5 times, there's a bit of a problem. Is that, we need to kind of resolve this, and it needs to be a separate team. For sales and the company, that can be a challenge, because you've just become a cost. You might have been a technical resource before that could have been charged out and your own little profit center, but now you become a cost to the business. And that, that's a long conversation about what the impact that has, and the challenge that has had on, in our profession. And probably we're only just coming out of that. So I think now it's kind of different. We're now seeing academies where we can teach people straight from college, almost teach them the skill set that's involved in pre-sales, and giving them a chance to kind of be mentored and then come into the profession. I always used to say about pre-sales is it's not a first career, it's a second career. Is that you need to have done something else beforehand that builds you the credibility and the experiences, to make you credible in the second career, which is pre-sales. So there are many routes into it. One of the things, if you're kind of developing new pre-sales talent is that there are actually certain other professions that work really well with it. Like teachers are brilliant. They're really, really good at understanding the architecture of, how things like demos should work. They understand about kind of getting key messages across and about summarizing things. They tend to be really good stand-up performers. The only thing we have to give them is obviously the technical credibility. But that also comes to a thing that if you looked at the world in the skill set in threes, it's probably four these days. We'll come back to that. And threes is what I mentioned before. It's kind of thirds. It's a technical thing. It's a domain, value, industry knowledge thing. Like if you're working in accounting, you can't just know how your technology works. You have to know that industry, or you'll get found out straight away. I've got some good stories about that. And the people and communication skills. When you deeply, deeply look at this, and I almost pose the question, you guys are experts in this, but when you deeply look at this, the one thing that's the easiest thing to teach is going to be your technology. And that's really because in your business, you have to be able to teach clients and customers how your technology works. So you've got to have resources on how to teach, the technology. It's much, much harder to teach someone to be credible in an industry and to talk the right language and to have a LinkedIn, CV or a kind of a resume thing that makes you look like you know what you're talking about. That's, you can't invent some of that. And of course, there's a discussion about the people and communication skills, how much of that can actually be taught. Is it innate? Are you born with it? And the whole discussions about, do you need to be extrovert versus introvert? I'm kind of more on I think you can be introvert and teach yourself to be an extrovert, which is actually what I am. I'll put that. If you met me in real life, I am not like this at all in real life. I'm quite a shy person, but I've learned to turn it on. And
That's amazing.
I think most of the people in pre-sales, that's what you actually are. You're probably more of an introvert who can turn on being the extrovert. All it is, it costs a lot of energy to do that because you've been something that you have to be something not naturally. So it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot how you get into pre-sales. I think there's less people get into it by accident. I think it's a career choice for people. We've now got academies. We've now got routes that you can come from college. But I think that's quite tough. If you do that, you're going to have to be very dedicated to do that. I think it's a lot easier if you've had a first career and then realize that I'd love to be seen as an expert, communicate, be able to influence people, advise people. And if that's what you think, I'd like to take what I know and be able to do that. That's perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for in pre-sales.
Yeah. So good. I actually remember, I'm thinking back now to when I started recruiting for pre-sales, which would have been, I think, kind of 2011, something like that. And the profile does feel like it's changed a lot. I remember then it was definitely more middle-aged, more kind of male, normally quite a lot of deep technical knowledge. I think in those days as well, more people worked for the mega vendors as like a percentage. And so there was actually quite a lot of technical complexity and so on. I think there were some more prima donnas than there are these days. Like that, I think the level of emotional intelligence seems to have increased a bit, and less emphasis. It almost felt like kind of people that had been in a technical role for a long time and were then into pre-sales, whereas now it's becoming like a blend in its own right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there are actually lots of tech companies out there who will be what we call non-traditional recruiting, which is if you're going to be selling to a domain of, let's say, the restaurant industry, you actually might look for someone who's come from that as a background because they're super credible and they've probably used the technology or something similar. But boy, if they've got loads of war stories and super credibility, about because the empathy levels they can have are kind of very, very high level. And that is, as long as you're articulate with it as well, I think that works really, really well. So you don't have to have the technology thing. Even if you've worked in the industry, that really helps.
Yeah, completely.
Thank you so much, both of you. And if you're thinking then for the future, do you think there will be some specific changes Do you have any idea how this would look like in the future as a career?
Yeah, so I've been thinking for quite a few years, thinking quite deeply about the changes. I'm really glad in the last couple of years we've kind of I don't know, we've kind of managed to grow a new idea of buyer enablement.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it's coalesced into kind of like an idea of what that is, because people had spotted for a while the effects of this, which is, first of all, consumer behaviors in the business world is that we're meeting people when in the sales cycle who seem to be a lot more, they research the topic a lot more. They're a lot more aware of it. They're more challenging when you meet them for maybe the first demo. Is they won't stand for you doing your standard harbor tour or something like that, where you just go around, this is what it does, almost like teaching. They won't stand for that anymore. They know exactly what they want, which is, don't show me that. I saw that on a video. What I want you to do is, how are you going to tackle these particular challenges that we've uniquely got? So so the buyers are changing. There's all this research that they're 2/3 of the way through their buying journey before you meet them in the sales process. And all of these things, like the ideas behind buyer enablement, that we're no longer selling. What's actually happening is we need to enable and empower the champion inside the client, the person who's going to help you. Yeah, they're the ones doing the selling internally, and we're there to support them. Now, if that's what's happening, and it really does look like that's the way things are changing, that dramatically changes what buyers expect of our role. So I have a running joke for the last couple of years now about pre-sales people changing their job title. And we have this kind of like fake business card. I don't know if anyone uses a business card anymore. And the fake business card says on it, I'm the person you actually wanted to speak to.
Yeah.
Now, so now that's a little bit challenging. But what it is that if you think from a buyer's perspective, where buyers are in their journey when they meet you, they're looking, what they're looking for. It's consumer behaviors into the business world. They don't want to be sold to anymore, or not overtly sold to. Do you want to buy one of these? Because that just washes over people now. Now they're looking for someone who's, who's credible, who's articulate, who can be an equal. Understands their industry and domain, but also the value, had the empathy to understand the challenges they're under, but also can advise them on the journey that they're going to have to take towards actually having this, having the outcomes delivered. And you'll notice I said outcomes delivered and not sold, not a contract, not signing anything, because in a way that's incidental on a journey to delivering something. Yeah. So buyers want something different. They're looking for sales techniques in the idea that we would understand what the journey is going to look like. We can anticipate the content and challenges that they're going to have, and we can advise them, and we can create what we call sense making. They're probably overloaded with information when you meet them, and we have to kind of create sense into that, about how does that all coalesce down into which bits are important, and how does that get you to where you want to be, which is this outcome. So I think we're moving into a world where it's actually quite difficult for pre-sales now, and I'm just wondering if we're getting to a point where we've overloaded the skills that we're asking of people, and their techniques and the tools that we give them, because we're still asking them to be, technically, brilliant, to know the product inside out, exactly what it does, and keep on top of all the latest updates. We still, expecting them to be, to understand the industry and keep on top of it as well. You can't just, what's happening in oil and gas. You need to kind of really dig into it and get yourself involved in, forums that are kind of exploring where it's all going, or, what's actually happening right now in the industry, what challenges, what real-time challenges are people in that industry experiencing, and, plus keep developing your people and communication skills. And now we're also asking you to take on what are really sales skills.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a challenge. I think a lot of companies are kind of realizing that, some of us might, in pre-sales, might be starting to get upset with this, because maybe you thought the role was, I'm the technical person, I don't want to get involved in sales, that's somebody else's problem. I want to keep the role of an account exec and the technical authority. Keep the two things separate. I don't think you can do that anymore. And the reason is, and it's not the tech company driving things now. It's what the buyer wants. Yeah. The buyer is expecting you to not just have the technical chops, not just have the industry chops, but also be able to advise them on what the journey is going to look like to get to the outcomes, which just so happens that there's going to be, we have to sell you something, you have to sign something or subscribe to something or consume to something, and there's got to be some kind of like revenue exchange, because that's how businesses work. Yeah. We have to understand all that. And that's quite tough, because also it changes the relationship with account execs, which under no circumstances I'm saying that you don't need salespeople anymore. You absolutely do. Salespeople will have brilliant kind of closing skills, political skills, opening, lots of skills that we probably don't have. But the overlap is getting quite significant now.
Yeah. That's so insightful, everything. Thanks so much. And I picked up on you saying that perhaps we're starting to kind of overload in terms of what hiring managers are expected. As a recruiter, I can say that overloaded shopping lists of requirements have always definitely existed. And then you get to the cold reality of demand and supply and what people have, and you start to have to kind of start trading off effectively. And I think that the last year has been a prime example of that, and it's really pushed towards out of the box thinking about focusing on people from other industries like teaching and that sort of thing. And I think that's quite positive that that's happened. So if you let's say you were consulting a company and they were traditional pre-sales organization, and they're really focused on embracing this kind of buyer enablement methodology, and you have one section that was hiring and the ideal profile, and I know you've kind of touched on it before. If they were to say to you, what are the one or two things that we're most looking for? So that either could be industry experience, it could be abilities specific, like people with strong discovery or strong demos, etc., or it could just be the underlying competencies that lead to that. What do you think will make up this ideal future profile in that respect?
Maybe we use the word consulting skills, because consultants have got a lot of the things we probably need to evolve into. That ability to consult with people. We're not selling to them. Influencing is a very one direction word. Is that we want to be able to influence them, especially. The other thing, by the way, with pre-sales as well, is that it used to be that it was a one-to-one thing. We were either in the same room or through the camera, and we would look at each other and we communicate through the eyes. But it's not going to be like that anymore. It's a lot more of it is going to be video and one-to-N, which is, and it's what people are starting to call about moving left. So what I mean by that is, if you look at a sales cycle, and generally in the Western world, it starts on the left-hand side, and we have all these different stages, and then you close the sale on the right-hand side. If you look at Salesforce or HubSpot or any probably CRM, they've got something that graphically shows you that. We have to move a lot further left because of this, 60, 70% of the buying journey, which is happening well before we even find out that there's an opportunity, before business developers have found it. And we have to find a way of taking our ability to influence and advise, our technical chops, the whole thing, and encapsulate it into probably, not just video, but kind of social media as well, and inject it into this space where, we may never actually meet these people, or we may meet them next year. That is quite a shift for people who got used to, I was all getting used to the one-to-one nature of the role. And now is, can you project, the good things, the skills that you've got, your ability to communicate, to consult as an equal, can you project that into this one-to-many world? And then how are you going to go about doing that? But going back to the question, consulting skills are probably it, which is that, can you advise people? Can you come across as, credible and knowledgeable? And sometimes I say this word as an equal. Really what a buyer is looking for is someone who's maybe got the same experiences of them, the same, can you adjust your thinking to have the same worldview as them? Because they want to talk to an equal. They don't want to speak to someone who's going to turn up and have to learn from them, although that's exactly what is going to happen. we all know if you've ever worked with some of the big consultancies, that's exactly what happens. Is they turn up and that's what they're going to do, is spend the time learning for you, and you're going to pay for it. So if you didn't know that, by the way, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
That's probably, I'll never ever get any more work from consultancies because I've said that, but there you go. So yeah, consulting, I think that's a good way of encapsulating. If you think about what a consultant does, I think you have to learn to be a lot more about that and maybe less on the presentation side of things.
Okay. So, and based on other conversations as well, this kind of is coming together, this idea of, so curiosity is something that people often talk about, and customer centricity. And I think the two of them together make a great consultant and can lead to trust, if that makes sense, because the customer feels that you really want to help and you're really trying to dig into what the issue is. And that creates the trust. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the kind of a part of the consulting skills that you're kind of talking about.
That's it. Yeah. There's a chap I met while I was at Oracle who used to do the big onboarding for salespeople, Mel Harms, and he used to say, if you forget everything about, how you kind of discovery or these question skills, if you forget any of that, just get down to these two words: be genuinely curious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not
that's
just
exactly what I'm trying to get at.
100%.
Yeah, 100%.
And that will get you through everything. In the old days we used to say you have 2 ears and 1 mouth and do things in that proportion, listening skills, but you can condense it all the way down to what he said: just be genuinely curious.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Thank you so much, Dan. And in terms of the results that we shared with you, do you have any insights? Like, do you find any interesting results?
So shall I, for the interest of the audience, shall I say that so we're currently asking hiring managers to complete a survey around hiring. And the idea is to have a snapshot of what hiring managers rate when when hiring effectively, in terms of abilities, competencies, and so on and so forth. And then a look at what assessment tools they're using and how they're assessing those capabilities. And so the idea is to provide a report that will give us a snapshot of that. And at the same time provide like a point of view around the different assessment tools and techniques that are available, what their strengths and limitations are, and other findings that we've found are interesting. So we've made the most of the occasion to ask Don. Well, we've provided him with the preliminary results, and it will be really interesting to get, because obviously you come from a completely different perspective from us. So we're really interested to hear if anything particularly jumped out to you from the initial results.
Yeah, so just ahead of that is we're looking for more people to contribute to what John and Isabella have done. So I'm going to put my hands up and help out as much as I can, because I think this is an amazing thing that you've done here. More contributions definitely needed. As a profession and a craft, we really go back a couple of years, we really haven't had anything like this at all. We didn't even have an identity. But now we've got these resources, and this is brilliant, because what you're doing is not something that we've had before. It's kind of exploring what people are thinking about when they're hiring. What was interesting, because you're asking questions of, let's say hard skills. How much is it important to you that you had hard skills? And it'd be like, 1, not important, 10, very important. What's really interesting is almost everything you ask of a hiring manager in the pre-sales world is well, everything's important. And that's a huge challenge. We obviously, as kind of pre-sales leaders, hiring managers, we haven't really got it in our head kind of completely thought out what it is that we're kind of looking for. There's a suggestion there that actually because this survey's right now in 2022, we're less interested in the hard skills, the technical skills, more interested in the soft skills. Was absolutely right. 2 thumbs up. If I could give you 3 thumbs up for that, that's exactly what you should be doing. But further on in the survey, you're kind of starting to learn that a lot of it is intuition-based hiring. Although people are getting senior leadership to do like separate interviews and to do peer interviews, the feeling is they're not as important as your interview, your intuition. You have as a hiring manager, and also you kind of also suspecting you're not probably getting the support that you need on formal hiring and recruiting kind of procedures, and 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 even so there's a message kind of going through all this, which is, and again, like I said, it's preliminary, is that it's a really interesting view. I mean, when this gets published, it's just dynamite. I'm going to kind of project it out as much as I possibly can across my network, because I think every pre-sales leader and manager, anyone who's hiring, needs to kind of have a look at it and be thinking about the questions that you're actually posing there.
Yeah.
Because some of this has to change. It's got to change. We've got to think about some of this stuff in a lot more depth.
Yeah. I mean, so I totally agree with everything you said there. And what's kind of jumped out to us is that, from the conversations we've been having, it's clear that hiring is critically important. That there's a big difference between a great hire and a good hire, if that makes sense.
Yes.
That it's hard. So, 64% have said that it's either 8 out of 10 or above, difficult to find a quality pool of candidates to recruit from. So you don't have this kind of fantastic set of 5 people from which to select from. Often you're having to trade off, and also with all these different requirements that you've got. And then, exactly as you say, so only 21% said that hard skills were important. Perhaps in reality, it's a bit more based on the situation, but at least in theory. Whereas like 96% for motivation, 89% for cultural fit, and 87% for soft skills were either 8 out of 10 or above. So there's this clear kind of focus on the softer part of the profile, which are really hard to measure, and they're just inherently just very difficult to get a feel from, because humans are complex. And then you've got, like you say, you've got hiring managers effectively, so that with limited training and support, based a lot on intuition, based a lot on their own interviews, which makes sense. So you can look at it 2 ways. You can either say, have you heard of the Lindy effect before?
No, please.
So it's this idea that if something has been about for a long time, there's a reason why. Okay, I can't think of an example now. So you could either be generous and say that's the case for interviewing, it's always been that way and there's something there to it. And maybe that's the case, but there's clearly been no evolution in terms of trying to evaluate using different methods and involving like modernizing the evaluation process, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And then the other big one for us is in terms of like structured quality of hire. There seems to be very limited structured quality of hire. It's very much kind of subjective. Well, maybe these hires, they've all worked out well and so on. And what I think that one of the point of views we're going to have in the report is, if you look at investors, okay, so before they make a big investment, they will take the time to write down at the point of making the investment what their thesis is, what their emotions are, and so on. Because if that investment then goes wrong or goes right, in our own heads, we change the story as we go along. And often we become the heroes of the story, kind of like we change a little bit. And so if, for example, when someone is to join, to simply write down what their strengths are, what their perceived weaknesses are, how you think this hire is going to go, and then just check back on it 6 months later. And then you'll find where intuition is working and where it's not working so well, and you're able to kind of tweak the process. And then for bigger organizations, if you have individuals, that hiring managers that for whatever reason just are consistently nailing it in terms of quality of hire, these people can be, because going back to the training, so lots of the conversations we've had, there's kind of vanilla, generic corporate trainer interviewing. Sometimes people don't just feel that enthusiastic about it. Whereas they do say, for example, having mentors, having people that have got lots of experience that can really help them has been really beneficial. So you can start to have champions in an organization that can help newer hiring managers in terms of developing their own kind of interview skills.
Yeah. I was just scrolling through to the side there while my eyes diverted off there, because one of the other things to draw out of there was because you asked about what do people include as part of the recruitment, the hiring process, and it's kind of group interviews. But one of the interesting things, certainly from my experience, was how prevalent is giving people a demo scenario and they have to kind of stand up and present or demonstrate to normally be the hiring manager and some of your peers, that kind of thing. I mean, many years ago, before we pressed record, we were talking about, we used to call them turkey shoots, because you'd get someone to present, but also we'd start firing objections at them and see how they handled them, because that's the real world. How well do you handle that kind of thing? But there's kind of, as we move forward, maybe, the demo side of things, the performance thing, yes, it's important, but actually maybe, giving someone a business case, which is, in the research that you've got so far, your analysis we've got so far is much less prevalent that people would give someone a business case or give them some discovery to do, or see how they work well together with an account exec. These things maybe they'll start taking more importance over presentation skills, because that's kind of the way it's going to go. We're going to do less demos because more of them are going to be on video, and it'll be more about your consulting skills, your ability to do discovery, back to the genuine curiosity thing, and how you advise a buyer to travel the journey to create the outcome.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also, even if demoing still is and presenting still is considered an important part of the role, the consultative side of things is a completely different skill set, and it's really important. So you want to be incorporating both. Sometimes there's a worry that from a candidate experience perspective, especially in a hot market, that you don't want to ask candidates to do too much. But I think you can incorporate both into one. You can incorporate it into one. And by the time you get to the end of the process where you're doing the group panel with the demonstration and so on, by that point, candidates normally are pretty bought in and willing to invest the time, if that makes sense. So I completely agree. And it's something that a few others have said as well, in the sense of there's a bit of a bias towards the communication side, and then everything else is like, well, hope for the best.
Yeah, I know kind of run out of time, but I had one fun thing that I saw in your kind of provisional report was to do with RFPs. So if anyone knows anything about me, I have a long history of writing terrible things about RFPs because I used to absolutely hate them. And I have a relationship with a company called Avnio, which is kind of using AI to try and do this, which is brilliant. But what's really interesting in the survey results is no one really knows what to say about it, is that, how important is it, the ability to answer RFPs, and it's all over the place, isn't it? It's not, you're asking, is it very important or less important? And I don't think anyone knows how to answer it, as in we just hate them, and we kind of, do we have to answer this question? Can we not just skip it? We're not kind of sure whether it's important, those skills, or not. But it's all part of people and communication skills. Communication isn't just your ability to stand up and wave your arms around. It's also, written communications as well. So it's all interrelated. I just thought it was funny that, most of the other responses were well sort of right. We think everything's important. And then everybody got really confused about what to say about RFPs.
Yeah. I think as well on that as well, in a way it reflects well on pre-sales, because it means there's only one component of the role that people, don't actively enjoy potentially so much, and everything else they enjoy. So it's all good.
Yeah, when I do meet people, because I'm quite open about expressing my views about this on LinkedIn, and you sometimes meet people who go, I don't know what you're talking about, I enjoy doing it. And you go, say that a little bit louder, because boy, oh boy, will you be loads of managers after you.
You can make it 100% of your role.
yeah. Wow. Okay, yeah. Wow, somebody who likes RFPs, quick hire them. Exactly.
Don, thank you so much for your time. It's always so good to speak to you, and I love your insight, and I love your enthusiasm, and your positivity is super contagious. And yeah, I look forward to sharing the full results when we have them, and to continue the conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Isabella. Thank you, John.
So much.
Absolutely loved it.
Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Don.
Cheers.